about Singapore Budget Day 2023 today, and what should we be looking out for Forward Singapore, the national conversation, and what's at stake for everyone?
So what's going to happen is we will be broadcasting the budget live as we wrap up to it in a couple of minutes or so. And we'll be covering various areas. I just want to check in with Tian Tian in this massive studio. I can't see you, but what are some of the areas that you'll be covering with our panel of experts?
Well, we'll be talking more about Singapore's fiscal position and what kind of support maybe businesses can expect going forward, as well as some of the announcements as and when they break.
Tim and I, of course, will be talking about the social compact with News. It's going to be quite a big deal.
Exactly. We are going to be talking to a panel of experts as well for their thoughts about what will be announced in the budget announcement today with Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, of course.
Okay, so we'll be locked up in the room together with these guys for the next 3 hours. I want to welcome into the studio Alvin Liu, senior economist at UOB. Alvin, good afternoon. We've also got Harvey Koenig, who is partner Energy and Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology, KPMG in Singapore. Harvey, good afternoon. And of course, Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law, Singapore Management University. Eugene, good afternoon.
Thank you, Elliot. Always a pleasure.
All right, gentlemen, I suppose to start us off, we'll just go around the room with a couple of questions. We've got time. Budget 2022, just looking back a little bit, how has that made an impact on businesses and society? I suppose when you consider that a lot of relaxation of COVID measures happened yesterday. Alvin, could I start with you?
Yeah, sure. From 2022 budget itself, right, we did see some COVID targeted measures to help some of the sectors, which is the services side, in-person services, tourism related. And because during that year itself, those sectors were still recovering.
Yeah.
But if you fast forward right now, right, yeah, you're like you said, we went to endemic state.
Yeah,
Then we got most of our measures really. So we do see that the possibility that some of these measures will be unwound or at least not being reduced in magnitude.
Okay.
That's one thing. Then in terms of the budget itself, we had budgeted a deficit for 2022. But based on the numbers that we have for revenue for the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year itself, right? For example, like corporate revenue is already exceeded the budget numbers. And I think the personal income tax revenue is also fairly high compared to the budget numbers, very close. So I think based on those revenue itself, and we assume that expenditure is thereabouts, we may actually see a very balanced or actually a slight surplus for the 2022 budget itself.
All right. Harvey, your thoughts, 2022 going into 2023?
That's right. I think last year's budget 2022 was, I think, maybe what we'll call a transition budget, really transitioning the economy basically from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And I think what we can see probably is a lot of the measures tapering off, and particularly focusing on really positioning Singapore into a post-COVID world. And I think certainly, I think one of the big measures announced was, of course, the introduction of the increase in the tax rate, GST, which of course it wasn't announced that it wasn't increased at one go from 7 to 9, but rather phased approach from 1% 23 and another 1% in 2024. I think as part of that, of course, there was a rethink around how Singapore's taxes would look like going forward. I think we will certainly given a preview. Let's see whether there'll be more in this coming budget.
Yeah. Eugene, I got a side bet going on. Valentine's Day present. This is only a cup of coffee, so it's harmless, right? Valentine's Day present, we delay GST hike. What are the odds of me losing this bet, Eugene?
I think there's a very high chance. That unless things change dramatically in the next couple of months, I think the government is fairly determined. I would say determined, to put the other 1% in place, in January 2024. And I think they have beefed up the assurance package last year, and so the question remains, whether they will add to the assurance package in light of
the global inflationary environment, which has impacted Singapore, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you asked about budget 2022. No one saw, the Ukraine conflict in the way that it is now, and how it unleashed, many other effects, whether we're talking about global supply, oil and all. So I think here, the mood is in a way fairly different, at the domestic level, with COVID now almost like a distant memory. But the global setting, I think, is still very precarious, unpredictable.
Mm.
And so I think, the budget, will have to be able to get the balance right, because ultimately, as a small economy, we are impacted by, the global headwinds and all.
So where do we go from here then? Now that, as you mentioned, COVID is right behind us, but we're facing a lot of headwinds that is beyond Singapore's control.
Yeah, so that's really the challenge, right? So how can the budget prepare us, for these headwinds? How will it enable us, to take whatever resources we have today, and prepare for the future, and given that balloons are very much, in the news these days, the question of whether, will we be able to get the bird's eye view and in a way, prime the economy, get the people ready, to face whatever is going to come our way. And so the word resilience, I think is something that we will see a fair bit, in the budget. Right? So whether we're talking about workers, whether we're talking about being climate resilient, I think this is very much the buzzword, in given the uncertainty. So the only way, Tim, is I think, we have, when a tough gets going, we just got to ride with it.
Okay. One thing that you pointed out, resilience will be a buzzword. So why don't we go around and just get your thoughts on what resilience mean to you and what should they mean to us, to every aspect of the society. You want to start?
I think, particularly for the business sector, what probably might be looking out for in this budget is probably a series of both short-term measures as well as long-term measures. Short-term measures, obviously, there's the more immediate need to cope with uncertainty that we can see in the global economy. So what sort of measures the government will introduce to kind of obviously move and support companies in this next 1 year or so. I think the longer term measures, I think will continue to be focused on transformation, on the internationalization of Singapore companies, as well as on innovation. I think which has been a key theme of the budgets in the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, actually, one of the big probably announcements that many of the companies are actually looking for is actually on whether the global minimum tax announcement, whether there will be a decision made in this coming budget. I think that because that certainly will have a play in how Singapore goes out to attract investments going forward.
Alvin?
Resilience. Okay.
We'd rather talk about recession, but I think resilience is nicer.
Yeah.
It's a more important thing for
Yeah.
us to learn about.
I think these are a few things that will stay in the budget for a while, as with things like social compact. I think was introduced last budget or the budget for. So these things, they go hand in hand. Part of the trying to keep the nation together and strive and prosper, trying to help the lower income and the more vulnerable groups while we progress higher, helping the businesses, be it from the SMEs on their road towards this recovery, and also towards the new world where you have the green world, the green economy. And they probably need help on these areas. And also, when you are doing well here, right, we can't stop here. The companies need to go outside of Singapore, which they need that help, which is what Harvey has talked about, the internationalization part. And that will all add up to that resilience picture. But on the GST, we do think that 1 year ago, when the decision was made for it to be staggered, right, the inflation outlook was not as elevated as what we have now, and the numbers still look fairly sticky. So we do think that there is a chance that they might delay the next one. We think that there's a chance.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone.
You might should get your cup of coffee.
I might
and
get
then-
two, by the way. It's I mean, just to overlap a little bit, Alvin's thoughts with yours, Eugene. The whole idea of this social aspect of things, right? I mean, resilience budget, it kind of organizes with the Singaporeans' attitude towards it. Even when you talk about sustainability as well, there has to be a mindset shift. Have you observed this? Especially from the time of all those budgets that were announced back when COVID was around in 2020.
I think it'll take a while. I suspect, we have become a bit too accustomed, to see what we would get out
Yeah.
of, the budget. And I remember a couple of years ago, the Ministry of Finance even had a budget calculator, on their website. But I think we need to look at the budget more than just, the sharing of, the nation's wealth and all. Because I think given the very strong fiscal position that we have been, notwithstanding, the drawdown on past reserves, um, the 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 fiscal resources that we have been built up, over decades. And so, if we have the mindset like, like an ATM machine, it's taking out from your bank account and you're not topping up, then I think, that we will run into big issues. But I think politically, it is challenging, because people feel somewhat uncertain, uneasy, over inflation, cost of living, job insecurities. And so I think, the immediate reaction would be, what is the budget going to do for me? But hopefully, we will over time, be able to shift that mindset, to not only just looking at the budget as in what it can do for me, but also how does it strengthen, individual, organizational, as well as societal resilience.
So, Eugene, what you're trying to say here is it sounds very much like, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And this is something that we need to address, not just for Singaporean citizens, but for all the foreigners like myself here. What can we do?
I think in the end, contributing to the economy is certainly one dimension. But of course, the other equally important dimension, is the social side. How do you see yourself as being part of Team Singapore?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because we all, much as we may have come from we may have different nationalities, but we are all striving, to make a living, to have a better future for ourselves and the next generation. So in that sense, when you focus on the commonalities, then I think there is less, that divide us. And the reality, is that, with Singapore in many ways, having fallen off the demographic cliff, we will constantly need to augment population, right? Not just in terms of numbers, right, but also in terms of quality, right? Because as the economy becomes a lot more diversified, as we attract a lot more multinationals, or even as local companies, so they will need that diversity of talent, which, for a small population, we probably will not be able to supply, all these different manpower, human resource capabilities. So I think it is the fate of Singapore, in my view, that we always remain open to people, ideas, investments, and trade.
So this GST thing that Elliot brought up, and 1% now and 1% next year, this is part of what we can do, right? As consumers,
For Terminal 5.
Well,
whatever it is,
I mean,
because
in
it
many ways,
raises-
I mean, the finance minister has from time to time been saying that, well, the GST will in a way contribute in terms of portion, wealthy people in Singapore, right?
Will be
Whether they're
spending more.
Singaporeans or tourists
Mhm.
or non-citizens. So yes, so there is that spending dimension. But I think, I think you raise a very apt question. That look at each and every one of us in Singapore. It's really being part of the larger team, right? Because I think we are stronger, because of the diversity in.
To bring to the point on GST itself, right? I think the Ministry of Finance has released a occasional paper just a few days ago. I think it pretty much reminds you why they are doing the GST, because there are parts of our expenditure that are on the trend up,
Mhm.
and healthcare is definitely the one key component. And if you throw in the mix now, right, that we are potentially going to look at the change in the corporate tax system, right? because of the BEPS, right? Then that is our biggest tax revenue for now. So if there's this to it to like to the downside, right? We need to find alternative sources. And GST is fortunately one very broad based and very, I would say, very sticky, and it's also quite a steady stream, which makes it not too popular, but a inevitable choice to put on the table for long-term basis.
Also, I mean, Harvey, just to throw this to you and to the rest of you guys, this whole notion of GST, I think, bets aside, it's also important to move forward because it's going to be very important for the finance minister to put out there that we are moving into perhaps moving away from this COVID era support. Harvey, thoughts on this? I mean, can we expect such a move with this year's budget?
Yeah, I think that that will certainly be the direction we're kind of expecting, because obviously right now it's really moving to more of, okay, how can we grow and help SMEs in Singapore? How can we grow the pie so that for workers and for companies alike, they will see profits bigger, and post-COVID world, salaries increase, and so that maybe so to speak, and we see a rising economy that will benefit everybody large. I think that certainly that will be the direction we're looking to see where are the areas government will invest in.
Yeah.
Is it sustainability? Are we going to build some new core competencies?
Mm.
Go into greenfield areas that so that Singapore companies will be able to also follow along and build up on those type of competencies, so that going forward, while we talk about increasing taxes, and ultimately the best way to grow revenue is really if we have a good, healthy economy.
Sure.
Everybody pays tax on the back of your profits and salaries.
Alvin, any thoughts? Moving away from COVID era support?
I think it's inevitable that we will move away.
Yeah.
I think the thing I do see, right, is that just now when you were talking about the sort of like migration diversity, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, we are still a strong believer of trying to turn the tide on fertility. That you can't give up that fight. Yeah, and to take that fight right down the line, right, you need to go to where the source stopped. Would be able to help you, which is one is definitely the government. So you must provide the incentives, the on either on the tax break side, on the accessibility, as well as the price of education and childcare, so that you can try to reverse the situation. It is not easy, and migration will still be very part of the equation for us, but it doesn't mean that we should not do it.
But the reality is raising a family is not easy. First of all, in Singapore's context, it is expensive. How else can the government help in encouraging Singaporeans
Look at
to
you.
raise a family and
Like,
bring up children and all
I think
these things?
you put you have pointed to a key factor,
Yeah.
which is on the cost side. But if you're then, but what the government probably trying and cannot do, right, it probably cannot change the mindset. That's something that you have to work on. But if it is the cost that is a problem, right, then we will throw the stink at the cost. We can make
Okay.
education cheaper, provide more bonuses or childcare bonuses related. Just try to work on that factor. It will not, it is a key factor, but it's not the only factor. So that itself, right, may not change the whole thing. But
Mm.
if you don't attack it at this point where I will make it more cheaper for you, right, to have a child, right, then at least that this takes first step. Then after that, your values, your culture, your mindset of having family, right, then that is the other thing that the government probably can't do much. But at least they have addressed that cost issue that you have put on the table, which
What about getting married younger? I mean, Eugene, I think I'm too old to be in that. I don't know.
No, no, no.
I think of my friends' kids. I'm dead, man. But if we get married younger, start a family younger, I mean, I always think like my wife is too old to be a mother. I was thinking that if she were a lot younger, she would have the stamina to do it. But then comes back to the question: a lot of couples in Singapore are getting married older. Cost being an issue. Waiting for my HDB is a problem.
Correct.
Et
So,
cetera.
so it's multifaceted, right? So
Yeah.
we're looking at the average age of a woman getting married for the first time, being 28. I think the guys are
They
about
used
2 years of 31, right? So if I could use another Singapore term, like the runway, for a family is actually rather short. And so you're right, Elliot. The question is, how do we get Singaporeans, to tie the knot earlier, um, and then to be focused about starting the family young, and I think cost would be is one key concern. But I think in the end, it's not really just about cost alone, right? I think we need that support system, and so the finance minister, in the lead up to the budget, spoke about a Valentine's Day budget, and I'm wondering whether he has his eyes very much set, on a whole slew of measures to give it another shot, at pro
Pro-family.
creation, pro-family policies. Because I think that there is that concern, right? That we're not, we haven't fallen off the cliff. We don't want to fall off the cliff, because I think mindsets are the most difficult to change, right? So we have in Singapore, the very common joke, right? You see someone with three or more kids, and then you'll say, well, the person is probably of Catholic or Muslim, I mean, so we look at a family with three or more children, or more, I think somewhat unusual.
It's a good point because it actually goes back down to the foundation, religious activity, foundation of how they were brought up within the family. Maybe their parents were part of big families as well, so they're used to that.
No, correct. So the question is, we need to get his cost is important, and government policies must help to, ensure that the cost of raising a family is not exorbitant. But I think we need to work on the support system. Whether we're looking at childcare centers, a slew of education, that's affordable. And I think the government has been doing that. Whether we're talking about MOE going to the kindergarten sector, for example, and investing a lot more, in early childhood. So I think we are making steps. But the million-dollar question still remains. Whether we have somehow conditions ourselves feeling that one or two is enough. So that's something that Lee Kuan Yew wanted us to have, that mindset in the 70s. But now the question is, that's not going to work for us.
So the
going
cost,
ahead.
now, let's just say the cost is addressed and then there will be enough funding for anyone who wants to raise a family to be able to raise a family. You still have another issue where people are working longer hours, right? Mothers, fathers, no matter what, you're working 8 to 9 hours a day, plus your travel time to and from work. That takes up half your day.
That's totally correct. And you can address those questions as well for the government, from the government's perspective. But I think we just talk a bit more about what happened in Parliament these few days, right? They're talking about affordability and accessibility to housing, right? Again, there are also measures that can be done. So that itself, if measures are attractive, well targeted, it may be able to encourage people instead of they need to save out longer time to get married because they need to buy a house. And if that process is shortened, right, then you suddenly got a longer runway. Again, then you need to try to change the mindset. But I think the other side of the equation, of course, the yes, the mindset is still
The mindset is the hardest thing to change because I think, I've been here in Singapore for more than 20 years, and it is a society that puts a lot of importance into the type of work that you do. The time you spend being busy at work is how you are measured as a successful person, more than anything else. So that has to change.
We are in conversation, and we will continue this conversation. Of course, in the studio with us is Alvin Liu, senior economist at UOB, Avi Koenig, partner, energy and natural resources, telecommunications, media, and technology tax, KPMG in Singapore, as well as Eugene Tan, associate professor of law, Singapore Management University. We're going to cross over right now live to Parliament, where our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong is about to deliver his second budget speech.
2023 to 31st March 2024. So we have been fighting COVID-19 for more than 3 years. It has been a long, hard slog, full of unexpected twists and turns. And I thank everyone for your cooperation, hard work, and sacrifices. Through our collective efforts, we have found our way through this pandemic. Yesterday, we reached a new milestone and moved to DORSCON Green. In parallel, industries that were hardest hit by COVID-19 are seeing continued recovery. Demand has picked up for sectors like F&B and retail. Construction activities are back in full swing. Air travel has resumed, and Singaporeans are traveling again. SQ flights are filling up, pilots and cabin crew are busy flying, and Changi Airport is buzzing with life. All in all, amidst a very challenging external backdrop, our economy grew by 3.6% in 2022. The resident unemployment rate at 2.8% in December last year is below pre-pandemic levels. At the start of 2022, we had anticipated tightness in energy markets and supply chain bottlenecks. But the outbreak of the Ukraine war caught many by surprise. Despite it happening halfway across the world, the war set off a chain reaction of shockwaves throughout the global economy. Oil and gas prices shot up. We experienced a global shortage of grain and other food items. Some countries also imposed export bans to secure their own domestic needs, worsening global supply bottlenecks. Inflation was further fueled by tight labor markets across many countries, partly because those who left the workforce when COVID-19 hit have not all returned. And companies had to pay higher wages to attract workers, adding to inflationary momentum. So as many have observed, 2022 was a year of brutal inflation worldwide. By the end of last year, global inflation was around 9%. Inflation reached historic levels in many advanced economies. In the US, consumer prices were the highest in 4 decades. In Germany, they were the highest in nearly half a century. Singapore too had to contend with these inflationary pressures. MAS tightened our monetary policy 5 times since October 2021. While this has helped ease the pressure on headline inflation, it is still higher than what Singaporeans are used to. So to address cost of living concerns, I rolled out 3 packages last year, totaling more than $3.5 billion, extending comprehensive support to Singaporeans, especially the lower and middle income groups. We were able to fund these support packages from stronger than expected revenues, especially from corporate income tax and asset-related taxes in FY 2022. This additional revenue will also help to cover higher spending in other areas. In particular, HDB has ramped up its BTO supply to catch up with the backlog that had arisen from the COVID-19 delays. This means building more flats at a time when construction and land costs have increased, which in turn requires more funding resources. In FY 2022, we also drew on past reserves to fund our emergency COVID-19 public health expenditures. The President had earlier concurred with a draw of up to $6 billion from past reserves, specifically for this purpose. Because the public health situation has since stabilized, we now expect to draw a lower amount of up to $3.1 billion from past reserves. This brings the total expected draw on past reserves from FY 2020 to FY 2022 to $40 billion. This is lower than the initial draw of $52 billion that the government had sought the President's agreement for. It reflects our prudent approach in using our reserves, drawing on them judiciously only when there are compelling reasons to do so. So all in all, putting together our revenue upside with our higher spending, we expect a slight deficit of $2 billion or 0.3% of GDP for FY 2022. We last drew on past reserves during the global financial crisis in 2008. We spent $4 billion in FY 2009 and were able to put back what we drew 2 years later due to the sharp recovery in the economy and in our fiscal position. This time, we are in a different position. Our economy has recovered back to pre-COVID levels, but we continue to be in a tight fiscal position. It is therefore highly unlikely that we will be able to put back what we have drawn from past reserves. But we will not waver from our commitment to safeguard our reserves as a key strategic asset. They have helped Singapore to weather major global shocks, prevent high unemployment rates, and build up our capabilities even in the midst of economic downturns. Other governments spent more during this pandemic too, but they largely financed their additional spending by borrowing, which will eventually have to be repaid by future generations. In contrast, our reserves allowed Singapore to respond quickly without falling into debt or burdening either current or future generations of Singaporeans. And so we will continue to uphold our practice of fiscal prudence and the principle that underpin the protection of our reserves. And this is why it was necessary to raise the GST rate, to ensure we have the resources to take good care of our seniors and to keep a balanced budget over the medium term. I thank Singaporeans for your understanding of why we must continue to live within our means and contribute to our fair share of revenues and be good stewards of our reserves for the benefit of all Singaporeans, both now and in the future. For 2023, the key factor that will shape our growth is the global economy. For now, the picture is mixed and uneven because while there are weaknesses in many parts of the world, the IMF and the other economists do not expect a global recession this year. The EU is amongst the hardest hit due to the economic consequences of its exposure to the war in Ukraine. The US is seeing slower growth and a recession as the Federal Reserve continues to raise interest rates to combat elevated inflation. Even so, many economists expect any contraction to be mild. Asia is expected to continue growing this year. In particular, the COVID-19 infection wave in China has probably peaked. As China's COVID-19 situation stabilizes and it continues to reopen its economy, the pickup in demand should provide a boost to the global economy. Overall, based on current indications of global conditions, we expect positive but slower economic growth in Singapore of 0.5 to 2.5% this year. But our economic fundamentals remain strong. Our handling of the pandemic over the past 3 years has enhanced our reputation as a reliable and trusted node in global supply chains. Our deep relationships with both the US and China, as well as partners in ASEAN and the wider region, make us a neutral and increasingly important place for global and regional businesses. We will take full advantage of these opportunities to attract new flows of investments, capital, talent, and ideas. And all these will add vibrancy to our economy and create more good jobs for Singaporeans. But there are major uncertainties and downside risks to this year's forecast. A greater than expected decline in the US and EU economies could tip the world into recession. We may see an escalation of the Ukraine war or a prolonged conflict and stalemate, leading to new waves of disruptions that further weigh on global trade as well as consumer and business confidence. We also cannot rule out a new COVID-19 variant that could be more dangerous and virulent. Whether or when these events will happen cannot be predicted with certainty, but we must prepare ourselves for these risks and be ready to respond to them. We will therefore develop drawer plans so that we have the ability and resources to take swift action should these downside scenarios materialize.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3's live budget coverage, budget conversations. Of course, today in the studio with us is Alvin Liu, senior economist at UOB, Harvey Koenig, partner, energy and natural resources, telecommunications, media and technology, tax, KPMG in Singapore, as well as Eugene Tan, associate professor of law, Singapore Management University. Of course, this is Singapore Budget Conversations brought to you by UOB in partnership with KPMG. The Deputy Prime Minister right now talking about dealing with inflation. But Tian Tian, walk us through what was just talked about, the fiscal position of Singapore.
Right, we do have some numbers out here. Singapore's economy grew by 3.6% in 2022. If you look at resident unemployment rate at 2.8% in December, which is below pre-pandemic levels. And in fact, one thing to point out is that the fiscal position, the government is expecting a slight deficit of $2 billion, around 0.3% of GDP for FY 2022, and growth for this year expected to come in at 0.5 to 2.5%. Now, one thing to point out, though, is that the total expected draw on past reserves from FY 2020 to FY 2022 is $40 billion, which is lower than the initial draw of $52 billion that the government has sought the president's agreement for. Now, I do want to pose some questions to our panelists over here, maybe starting with you, Alvin. We do want to talk about the lower than expected draw on our reserves. To what extent was this within your expectations here?
Well, I mean, as you know, the Singapore government is pretty prudent in a lot the way they deal with a lot of their measures. So this smaller drawdown, right, doesn't really come as a big surprise. Of course, there was no way to predict the actual number itself. But what we did take away from the speech itself is that unlike the previous case in 2009, whereby they put the money back, this time round the amount is significantly larger, and that due to the external environment itself, I think it is highly unlikely they will be able to put it back anytime soon or even within that whatever time frame. So there is a difference this time around.
And on that note, talking about putting back what we have drawn from our past reserves, is there any telling when we'll be able to put it back? When will we be able to recover from that situation?
Honestly, right now, because of the economic environment, it is quite difficult. Because for one thing, right now, even though, as he mentioned, that we are not predicting a global recession right now, there are key partners for trading partners of Singapore that are going into a very bad spot in the next few months. I think Europe itself, because of their exposure to Ukraine, US, and actually a lot of the major economies, because of the aggressive policy tightening, they may be seeing slower growth or a mild recession for some. So that growth outlook itself is a bit weaker. And with the weaker growth outlook, right, you might see tax revenue, right, being weaker as well in the coming year, while the expenditure portion is on the trend increase for some of the components. So to fill up that coffers, right, for what we have taken out is going to be a bit difficult in the very short, in the foreseeable, the 1 year or 2 years.
All right. And right now, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong is talking about helping households and businesses deal with inflation. And Elliot, maybe we could go back to that conversation, that budget speech.
Previously, under our GST system, which means the GST and the GSTV combined, the more well-off consumers as well as foreigners and tourists will bear higher effective GST rates than lower income Singaporeans. This ensures that those with greater means contribute their fair share of taxes and will effectively lower the burden of taxes on lower and middle income Singaporeans. On top of the GSTV, we have the assurance package, or the AP, to cushion the impact of the GST rate increase on Singaporeans. In November last year, I announced that I would review and update the package to account for higher inflation. We have completed the review and will make the following enhancements in this budget. I will increase the AP cash by between $300 and $650 for eligible Singaporeans over the remaining years of the assurance package. This will bring the total AP cash payments received by adult Singaporeans to between $700 and $2,250 over 5 years. I will increase the CDC vouchers by $100 in 2024, so all Singaporean households can look forward to another $300 of CDC vouchers in January next year. These enhancements to the assurance package will enable us to maintain the commitments we had set out earlier, which is to offset additional GST expenses for at least 5 years for the majority of Singaporean households and for about 10 years for the lower income households. But I recognize that many Singaporeans are still concerned about the immediate cost of living issues. I will therefore introduce additional one-off support measures this year under the assurance package. I will provide a cost of living special payment of between $200 and $400 for each eligible adult Singaporean. I will provide additional support for seniors and extend a cost of living seniors bonus of between $200 and $300 for eligible Singaporeans aged 55 and above. I will also double the USAVE rebates provided to households over the next 3 tranches of disbursements this year. And in total, eligible households can receive up to $760 in USAVE rebates this year. For households with children, I will provide each child aged 6 and below a top-up of $400 to their child development account, and each older child a top-up of $300 to their EduSave account or post-secondary education account. These enhancements to the assurance package, the one-off all the enhancements I mentioned just now, both the one-off and the earlier ones, will cost $3 billion. So the total amount of the package will increase from $6.6 billion to $9.6 billion. With the enhancements to the GSTV scheme and assurance package, I will have provided comprehensive help for the majority of Singaporeans this year. On average,
So there you go, Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong announcing a whole slew of measures to help Singaporeans. USAVE is always music to my ears, Tim. I love it. He announced an increase of CDC vouchers by $100 for next year, so $300 in January next year to look forward to. But Tian Tian, I'm going to cross over to you now. Talk us through some of the enhancements and support for businesses that they can look forward to.
So we do want to talk about the enhancements to the enterprise financing scheme, which of course includes a 70% government risk share for trade loans, enhanced maximum quantum for trade and working capital loans, as well as support for domestic construction projects via project loans. But of course, I do want to cross over to our guest here, Alvin, to find out which are the sectors you think will benefit the most from this.
The loans itself. I think, broadly speaking, I think would probably be those in the major manufacturers.
Right.
But I think this itself is, I don't think it's not unexpected. But I would be hopeful that there will be a continuation of other schemes that are for the more medium and longer term. Yeah.
And to what extent do you think such loans will aid in the recovery of the construction sector, given that it was one of the most badly hit during the pandemic?
For the construction sector, I think there are problems.
Are there more protracted problems that you think will need time to solve on the supply side of things?
I think for them, it is also a manpower issue.
Right.
And to extend it, right, this is not just a construction issue. It's if you talk to various businesses in the services sector, in other sectors that requires a lot more manpower, right, this is one of the more pressing issue in their recovery process. It's good that we have those measures to help, but I think one of the things I'll put it as the elephant in the room, right, remains for them, right, the manpower, and that has been a big source of the lack of manpower, lack of available manpower, the right kind of manpower, and as well as the higher cost of the manpower itself.
And I'd like to open this question to the floor, maybe to Harvey as well. We want to look at the energy efficiency grant extended for 1 year. To what extent do you think this is effective in helping businesses navigate those higher electricity prices?
I think certainly the focus on energy efficiency, I think it needs to continue, especially with the geopolitical situation. I think we were going to see energy prices continue to remain high. So I think the focus on moving companies to more energy efficient, adopting more energy efficient type measures, be it by way of buying new equipment, for example, it is certainly the right way to go. But of course, I think in the short term, they will probably still see some shocks. I think some of these companies will probably have to find ways in which to transition over. I think that might actually take a bit of time as well.
All right, thank you very much. And maybe let's cross back to Deputy Prime Minister's budget speech right now.
It's about building our capabilities and seizing opportunities in the new era of global development. The geopolitical context has shifted significantly. Great power contestation has intensified, most notably between US and China, and this has profound implications for the world. For the last 3 decades since the end of the Cold War, the world has benefited from global economic integration. Countries everywhere embraced openness in global commerce. Multinational enterprises or MNEs developed their supply chains based on the most cost-efficient configuration around the world. But now, businesses are reorganizing themselves to account for once unimaginable tail risk, including geopolitical risk. More and more MNEs are looking to reshore, onshore, or nearshore. That is relocating factories and offices to places where they are less likely to get caught up in geostrategic crossfires. Governments in the developed world are also embracing more muscular industrial policies. Despite their macroeconomic policies being generally accommodative over the past decade, growth in many of these advanced economies has been sluggish. Incomes of middle earners there have stagnated and unemployment rates are high. They are therefore looking for ways to rebuild their manufacturing capabilities and create jobs for their people. The US in particular is determined to establish a clear technological lead over China, especially in critical industries like semiconductors and green energy. It has banned the flow of high-end chips and chip making to China and is engaging its allies to do the same. China, in turn, is investing in its own little giants to achieve technological self-reliance. We are seeing a huge contest for leadership in key technologies, which is likely to escalate with time. All this is setting off a dangerous dynamic towards greater economic nationalism and protectionism around the world. Governments are stamping out more aggressive support in the form of tax breaks and subsidies to anchor strategic industries. The major powers increasingly view economic matters through the lens of national security. Sanctions, investment prohibitions, and export controls are just some of the tools that they are using to safeguard national security. In short, we must expect to see greater contestation and fragmentation in the global economy. Countries are thinking less about mutual benefit and interdependence and more about national gain and security. An era of zero-sum thinking has begun. It will be a world that is less hospitable to small economies like Singapore, which have long thrived on an open rules-based multilateral system. We therefore cannot assume that we can continue to be successful by doing the same things as we have in the past. We will need to adjust to this new era, reposition our economy, and refresh our social compact for the future. This is not the first time that we've had to adapt to changes in the world, and it will certainly not be the last. We've done it many times before through many crises, and each time we emerged with a stronger economy and a more united people. And I am confident we will do it again. The key to our success is the trust we have in one another and our solidarity and unity as a nation. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the birth of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. I remember reading what he had said in 1967, soon after the turbulent period of Singapore's independence. He said, and I quote, "There is tranquility, poise, and confidence in Singapore. And it is a confidence born out of the knowledge that there are very few problems which we cannot overcome. For our people's natural industry and talent will continue to blossom and flourish and generate prosperity for all. Indeed, there are very few problems we cannot overcome when we apply ourselves as one people. It is up to us to overcome the problems we face, to improve on what we have today, and to build the Singapore we want for tomorrow. And this is why I'm glad that many Singaporeans have stepped forward to join us in the Forward Singapore exercise, sharing with us their aspirations and concerns, and joining hands and hearts to create our new social compact together. Our engagements so far have affirmed the shared purpose and values that underpin our social compact. We aspire to be a fairer and more inclusive society, and a kinder and more gracious Singapore, one where we value one another for who we are, share the responsibility of supporting each other, and uphold our sense of identity in a harmonious, multiracial, and multi-religious nation. To achieve these shared aspirations, the government is pursuing new strategies in a few key areas. How we can continue to uplift the wages of those at the lower end of the income distribution and sustain real income growth for workers in the broad middle. How we can support workers, especially those who are displaced, with a better system of reskilling and upskilling, so that they can be retrained and placed into new jobs and bounce back from setbacks in life. How we can give everyone opportunities throughout their lives to uplift themselves, so that the circumstances of birth will not determine how far they go, and we can keep social mobility alive and well in Singapore. And how we can better look after our growing number of seniors, not just their medical and retirement needs, but also their care and living arrangements, so that they can age in place with grace, dignity, and security. These are important but complex issues which require further exploration. We aim to complete the Forward Singapore exercise in the second half of this year. It is not just a matter of having the government do more to provide greater assurance and support. We will make changes and intervene boldly where there is a need to do so. But government actions must reinforce the values of personal effort, responsibility for the family, and mutual support in the community. These are values that keep our society strong and enable our people to stand with pride and contribute to society. At the same time, we must ensure that any additional spending can be funded and sustained well into the future, so that we do what is right, not just for today, but also for future generations. That said, there are several pressing issues that have emerged in our conversations, which we will address in this budget. We know that long wait times for new flats and rising resale home prices are key concerns for many young Singaporeans. We had a long discussion and debate about this in Parliament last week. We also want to help parents better balance their work and family commitments and look after their children. So we will move sooner on specific measures to support young married couples and create a more conducive environment for families. The budget this year is therefore part of a broader exercise to chart our new way forward together, and it is centered on three key thrusts to secure our future in a new era. We will grow our economy, equip our workers, and provide a fuller range of opportunities for everyone to advance in life. We will strengthen our social compact and provide better support for families, seniors, and vulnerable groups. And we will build up our collective resilience so that we are able to bounce back strengthened from external shocks and setbacks. Let me go through each of these trusts in turn. Sir, economic competition will get stiffer in this new era where countries compete for power and influence. Singapore will have to adapt quickly to these changes to survive and prosper in a troubled world. We will therefore redouble our efforts to attract high-quality investments. We will focus on growth sectors where we can be highly competitive. For example, we are a leading international financial center in Asia. We are a global trading hub with strengths in transportation and logistics anchored by our air and sea ports. We also have a vibrant manufacturing sector supported by key segments like electronics, chemicals, and biomedical science. These attributes and strengths will enable us to attract more MNEs to anchor their regional or even their global operations and headquarters in Singapore. With more high-value activities and best-in-class facilities based here, we will be able to build new capabilities, develop key industries, and create good jobs for Singaporeans. We will also create spin-offs for our local enterprises as they serve the MNEs based here, plug into global networks, and eventually grow to become industry leaders in their own right. But we must expect global competition for investments to get tougher. With the Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Initiative, or BEPS 2.0, on the horizon, we will have less scope to use tax incentives to attract new investments. Meanwhile, the US and other countries are rolling out vast subsidies to build up their strategic industries. It will not be possible for us to outbid these countries with even bigger subsidies just to get their MNEs to invest here. But neither can we afford to be complacent and simply take our competitive position for granted. We will therefore have to work harder to enhance our overall productivity and workforce quality to stay competitive in this new environment. We currently have the National Productivity Fund, which supports a wide range of measures for productivity enhancement and continuing education and training. I will top up the National Productivity Fund with $4 billion and expand the scope of the fund to include investment promotion as a supportable activity. We will use the fund to anchor more quality investments here. This includes supporting companies to build new capabilities, add greater value to our domestic ecosystems, and upskill our workers. And ultimately, these efforts will lead to better paying jobs for Singaporeans. Besides anchoring investments and deepening capabilities, we must nurture and sustain pervasive innovation across the economy. We have to push new frontiers and differentiate ourselves in quality and value. And this is why the government has consistently committed resources to R&D. We are investing $25 billion from 2021 to 2025 to catalyze research, innovation, and enterprise. We are restructuring and raising our game industry by industry through the industry transformation maps. Our efforts are bearing fruit, but innovation is not without risk, which businesses may find difficult to undertake amidst slower growth and higher cost. So to help our businesses press on with innovation, I will introduce a new enterprise innovation scheme. This scheme will significantly enhance the tax deductions for 5 key activities in the innovation value chain: R&D conducted in Singapore, registration of intellectual property, including patents, trademarks, and designs, acquisition and licensing of intellectual property rights, innovation carried out with polytechnics and ITE, and training via courses approved by Skills Future Singapore and aligned to the skills framework. Today, businesses can enjoy tax deductions of up to 250% of qualifying expenditure on some of these activities. I will raise the tax deductions to 400% of qualifying expenditure on each of these 5 activities, except for innovation. The qualifying expenditure will be capped at $400,000 for each activity, except for innovation carried out with polytechnics and ITE, for which the expenditure will be capped at $50,000. With these enhancements, businesses that make full use of the scheme could enjoy tax savings of nearly 70% of their investment. Some firms have yet to turn profitable and do not have sufficient profits to maximize the benefits from these tax deductions. To support these firms, I will allow businesses the option to convert 20% of their total qualifying expenditure per year of assessment into a cash payout of up to $20,000. This will help smaller firms defray the cost of their innovation activities, even if they pay little or no taxes. As our companies grow, we will support them in accessing capital to scale up and be globally competitive. A key part of this effort is to strengthen our enterprise financing ecosystem so that promising firms can tap on a wide range of private equity and venture capital funds, as well as financing from other financial institutions based here. The government has also been mobilizing investments in SMEs through Heliconia Capital, which deploys equity financing to SMEs and catalyzes additional growth capital from the private sector. To date, we have committed $1 billion to this effort and invested in about 60 Singapore-based companies. This has in turn catalyzed around $2 billion of additional investments into these companies. The total revenue of this portfolio of companies has more than doubled after this investment, and over half of them have developed new capabilities or expanded beyond Singapore. Given the positive outcomes, I will set aside an additional $150 million via the SME Co-Investment Fund. We will use this to invest in promising SMEs, and we will also aim to catalyze an additional $300 million of private investments to support our SMEs. We are also developing a healthy pipeline of enterprises with a strong track record of international success and the potential to move to the next level. One example is More East, which I visited recently. The company provides specialized anchor and mooring solutions for the offshore and marine, or the O&M sector. We all know what a floating rig is. We don't always see what lies under a floating rig, but good design, engineering, and manufacturing capabilities are needed to customize mooring solutions for very different seabed and offshore conditions. And More East, a homegrown company, is now one of the top 3 global players in this niche area. But it also recognizes the long-term challenges of the O&M industry. And so the company is now diversifying and applying its capabilities in the offshore renewable energy market. It has already secured contracts to provide the anchors for offshore wind turbines in Japan and Europe. And there should be many more opportunities to come with the growing global demand for offshore wind and other renewable energy projects. We will do more to help promising companies like More East grow into globally leading companies. In last year's budget, I introduced the Singapore Global Enterprises Initiative to provide such companies with more dedicated and customized support. I will now set aside $1 billion to provide a further boost to this initiative. Promising companies will be offered specialized capability building programs tailored to their needs. This could involve working with experts to strengthen the core leadership team, accelerate their internationalization plans, and build a strong talent pipeline. Enterprise Singapore will also support them to secure resources to execute their growth plans and to build sustained research and innovation capabilities so they can strengthen their value proposition and stay competitive. The Enterprise Innovation Scheme, the boost to the SME Co-Investment Fund, and the Singapore Global Enterprises Initiative are part of a wider suite of government measures to help nurture and develop our enterprises. So I encourage all our companies, big and small, to make full use of these measures to innovate and grow.
You're listening to Money FM's Budget 2023 coverage. Of course, in the studio with us, our reaction panelists, the likes of Alvin Liu, who is a senior economist at UOB, Harvey Koenig, partner at Energy, Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology, Tax, KPMG in Singapore, as well as Eugene Tan, associate professor of law, Singapore Management University. Right now, the Deputy Prime Minister talking about equipping and empowering our workers, a segment that Tim and I will cover in just a while. But while we have a little bit of time, Tian, could you walk us through some of the initiatives that DPM announced with regards to SMEs?
Before we talk about the regards what's going on for SMEs, I do want to touch on this point, which is the base erosion and profit shifting initiative. That will make it as such that Singapore in fact, will have less scope to use tax incentives to attract new investments. So I do want to pose a quick question to Harvey, talking about the base erosion and profit shifting initiative. Why does this make it harder for Singapore to use tax incentives to attract new investments? Could you enlighten us a bit?
Sure. Basically, the basic erosion and profit shifting initiative introduces a global minimum tax of 15%. If you look at companies that may enjoy tax incentives that give them tax rates of, say, 5% or 10%, obviously, under the global minimum tax, that will neutralize the benefits from the incentives. And what will happen then is companies need to basically do a top-up tax to bring the effective tax rate up to 15%. So I think that's why PM was saying that we might have limited scope of using tax incentives, and going forward, it will be a case of probably the economic agencies like EDB and Enterprise Singapore having to look at potentially attracting Singapore by way of other means like subsidies or various grants.
We do want to touch on this new enterprise innovation scheme as much as 400% in tax deduction for some qualifying expenditures for activities like R&D conducted in Singapore. What do you think is the profile of companies targeted at, in your opinion, and how effective will this be?
Certainly, I think this is a very welcome announcement. I think it's, in a way, it's really targeting companies to try and encourage them to continue to invest in R&D, in innovation, even in training, despite potential short-term headwinds of inflation and slow growth. It is, I think, quite critical to ensure that all companies actually do continue to invest in R&D, innovation. Certainly the target of the scheme are the smaller companies like SMEs. It's also actually welcome to see that DPM has indicated that there might be companies that may not be making profits, losses. They're able to actually cash out some of these tax benefits up to amount of $20,000. I think that will certainly go a long way, especially companies who are in investment phase or in R&D phase where they might not see large profits.
And a very quick question for everyone on the floor, perhaps Prof. Tan and also Alvin, talking about investments into SMEs. How effective do you think this will be in driving innovation?
I think incentives are important, but I think more importantly, they try to drive home the message, that in order to compete, companies will have to do things better, come up with better products. And so I think here is where research and development, must then result in innovative products or even services. So I think that's where I see this incentive scheme as coming. And so the question is whether, our businesses will bite this particular incentive, because I think it's essential for them, to upgrade their capabilities.
All right, so sorry about that. I believe Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong is starting a portion of speech on helping our workers, so we'll have to go back to the speech right now. Elliot, please, thanks.
Learn new skills to interact with and take care of his clients. We want to encourage and support employers who recognize the value that seniors like Mr. Rahmat offer, invest in them, and enable them to keep earning a good living. We will therefore extend the senior employment credit till 2025 to continue providing wage offsets to employers that hire senior workers. I will also extend the part-time re-employment grant till 2025 to encourage employers to offer part-time re-employment, other flexible work arrangements, and structured career planning to senior workers. And the Minister for Manpower will share more details at the COS. At the same time, we will continue to help lower wage workers achieve better career progression and wages. We made several major moves last year. We expanded the progressive wage model to more sectors and occupations, and we required companies that employ foreign workers to pay all local employees at least the local qualifying salary. Taken together, these moves cover the vast majority of lower wage workers and will help to uplift their wages. To provide transitional support for businesses, I introduced the Progressive Wage Credit Scheme, or PWCS, at last year's budget. And last June, I raised the government's co-funding share for the 2022 PWCS. I will maintain the increase for this year and top up the PWCS fund by $2.4 billion for this purpose. I will also do more for specific groups of workers who may need more help to secure employment. To support employers to hire persons with disabilities or PWDs, I will enhance the enabling employment credit to cover a larger proportion of wages and a longer duration for PWDs who have not been working for at least 6 months. We know many PWDs want to work and, if given the chance, have valuable skills to offer. As a society, we should give them the opportunity to do so. I will also introduce a new uplifting employment credit in the form of a time-limited wage offset to encourage firms to employ ex-offenders. More details on these schemes will be shared by the Manpower Minister at the COS, and we will review the outcomes in 2025.
So, Deputy Prime Minister, they're putting low-wage workers in focus. I like the part where he talked about ex-convicts also, something that an area that needs to be engaged as well. Gentlemen, very timely, because earlier on we were talking about how we are an aging population. All of this is in line. It's an interesting one because the next time we come back, we'll be talking about building families. Elvin, walk us through the line of thought here, the urgency to create this ecosystem.
For all the measures that I think even when you think about the enterprise innovation scheme, right? It's also in a way to increase productivity, and a way I think when you do innovation itself, right, you're actually going to lower your reliance on like just using manual labor. I think it all works together in that area, and of course, providing more for the lower wage workers is to take care of that one segment that is actually, I would believe, that is going to be quite hard hit in this current environment. Yeah, and of course, like what you mentioned on the ex-offenders, it's also an area that
one.
it's like you have missing segments of the workforce, right? That could be gainfully employed in good roles, right? Without the stigma of those, and that they need financial incentives is given for the companies for them to take that step.
Do you think these financial incentives will be enough, though, for companies? I'm speaking from experience here because when I started as a small business person, we did want to employ people with disabilities and ex-offenders until everybody warned me that they will work when they work, and they will be good when they're working. But when there's trouble, it might be challenging for small business owners. Do you think a grant would be able to change the minds of business out there in this regard?
I think I would like to give the example of my bank. I think we do have a certain department that does very precise work. And that department itself, the work of checking and very detailed work, right, is actually very suitable for people with certain special needs,
Mhm.
but they do not interact very well with the rest of the society, but they
Mhm.
are very good at the work that they do. And I think the point is also that if you are looking for a very outgoing job, a role, you employ the wrong person for it, it's not going to work for a
Mhm.
company. But in that role itself where it needs detailed attention, and then this group of special needs colleagues that we have, right, they really excel in that role. It really needs you to find that role for the
So
person.
it's about matching
Yes,
the
that's
people
correct.
and the companies where they
Mm.
can be working.
And the grant that certainly will help.
Mm. All right, we've got to get back to Deputy Prime Minister, who is now talking about building a Singapore made for families. If you're looking for a BTO, have a listen.
We will therefore focus on first-timer families with children, as well as young married couples aged 40 years and below who are buying their first home. We will do more to help such families secure their BTO flats in a timely manner, including by giving them an additional ballot for their BTO flat applications. This will be implemented later this year, and more details will be provided by the Minister for National Development at the COS. Some Singaporeans are prepared to buy resale flats for their first homes, but they find the resale prices today too expensive. We have implemented cooling measures to moderate demand in the resale market, and the launch and completion of more BTO flats over the next few years will further ease demand and prices of resale flats. I will also provide more support for first-timer families to purchase resale flats. I will increase the CPF housing grant by $30,000 for eligible first-timer families purchasing 4-room or smaller resale flats, and by $10,000 for those purchasing 5-room or larger flats. Eligible first-timer families purchasing resale flats will qualify for this increased CPF housing grant with immediate effect. The additional grant amount will be credited into their CPF account from April this year onwards. Together with the enhanced CPF housing grant and the proximity housing grant, eligible families can receive up to $190,000 in grants when buying a resale flat. Second, I will do more to support parents with the cost of raising their children. The government already has a generous set of measures, including the baby bonus scheme, significant preschool and education subsidies, and tax benefits like the parenthood tax rebate and the working mother's child relief. Some of these schemes need to be adjusted to ensure that more support is given to those with greater needs. For Singaporean children born or adopted on or after 1st January 2024, I will change the Working Mother's Child Relief, or WMCR. I will change it from a percentage of the mother's earned income to a fixed dollar relief. This will take effect from year of assessment 2025. So for Singaporean children born or adopted before 1st January 2024, there is no change to the WMCR that eligible working mothers can claim. With this change, eligible working mothers in the future will claim the same amount of tax relief for a child in the same birth order. $8,000 in tax relief for the first child, $10,000 for her second child, and $12,000 each for her third and subsequent child. Effectively, this will provide more government support for eligible lower to middle income working mothers. We will also lapse the foreign domestic worker levy tax relief for all taxpayers from the year of assessment 2025. This is because we already have a migrant domestic worker levy concession, which provides more targeted support for families who need help caring for their dependents, including young children below 16 years old. While we make these adjustments, I will at the same time significantly increase financial support in the child's early years. I will increase the baby bonus cash gift by $3,000 for all eligible Singaporean children born from today onwards. Eligible first and second born children will receive $11,000 instead of $8,000. And for the third child onwards, the baby bonus cash gift will be increased from $10,000 to $13,000. Currently, the baby bonus cash gift is disbursed in 5 installments over the child's first 18 months to help defray child raising costs during infancy. I will restructure the disbursements so that they are paid out over a longer period. So eligible parents can expect up to $9,000 in payouts in the first 18 months of a child's life, as well as $400 every 6 months, starting from when the child is 2 until the child turns 6.5 years old. So in this way, parents can receive continuous support all the way until their child enters primary school. For eligible Singaporean children born from today, I will also increase the government contributions to the Child Development Account or CDA, which their parents can use to directly offset preschool and healthcare expenses. I will increase the first step grant from $3,000 to $5,000. This is automatically credited into the CDA and parents can immediately benefit from it once they open the account. I will also increase the government co-matching cap for the CDA. Today, the government co-matches every dollar that parents save in the CDA up to a cap of $3,000 and $6,000 for the couple's first and second child, respectively. I will increase these co-matching caps by $1,000 each to $4,000 for the first child and $7,000 for the second child. To cater sufficient time for the required legislative system changes, the actual enhancements to the baby bonus cash gift, CDA first step grant, and CDA co-matching caps will be made available from early next year. The disbursements enhancement will be made available from early next year. We will notify parents when they can make the additional deposits into their child's CDA to enjoy the enhanced government co-matching. The changes I've just described apply, as I mentioned, to eligible Singaporean children born from today. Some may ask, how about those born earlier? In fact, at the height of the pandemic, the government had provided a one-off baby support grant of $3,000. This was for children born from 1st October 2020 to 30th September 2022. So to ensure that we do not miss out on some new parents, I will extend this grant to babies born from 1st October 2022 to 13 February 2023. So to all young married couples, whether you already have a newborn or you are expecting a baby or you plan to have a baby, we have something to help you in your parenthood journey. Third, we will better support parents in managing their work and family commitments. Here, a key component is flexible work arrangements. We have been encouraging employers to adopt the voluntary tripartite standard on flexi work arrangements and to make these arrangements more pervasive. We will implement these tripartite guidelines by next year, which means that employers will be required to consider staff requests for such flexi work arrangements fairly and properly. We will also strengthen our leave provisions for parents of infants. Currently, eligible working fathers of Singaporean children are entitled to 2 weeks of government-paid paternity leave. When we introduced this 10 years ago, take-up rates were low. But over time, the situation has changed. Today, more than half of our fathers take paternity leave. I am heartened by this trend. We should all be, because many studies internationally and in Singapore have shown that children with more involved fathers have better physical, cognitive, and emotional development outcomes. I will therefore double the government-paid paternity leave from 2 weeks to 4 weeks for eligible working fathers of Singaporean children born on or after 1st January 2024. For a start, the extra 2 weeks will be given on a voluntary basis. This is so that employers who are ready to grant the additional leave will be reimbursed by the government. And this is also to give more time for employers to adjust, especially taking into account the existing economic conditions and manpower and operational challenges that many employers face. But we will review this, and we intend to make this mandatory in due course. With the doubling of paternity leave, I hope the message is clear. We want paternal involvement to be the norm in our society, and we will stand behind all our fathers who want to play a bigger role in raising our children. I will also increase unpaid infant care leave for each parent in the child's first 2 years, from the current 6 days per year to 12 days per year. This will give parents more time to bond with and care for their newborn or to settle caregiving arrangements. All parents of Singaporean children will be eligible for this additional time off if they have worked with their employer for a continuous period of at least 3 months. And this too will apply from 1st January 2024 onwards for eligible working parents with Singaporean children aged under 2 years old. Taken together, these enhancements will increase parental leave for a working couple from 22 weeks to up to 26 weeks in their child's first year. The enhancements with the baby bonus cash gift, CDA, and leave provisions will cost the government an additional $240 million per birth cohort of children. And I hope this will provide greater assurance to parents and parents-to-be as they think about starting and raising their families in Singapore.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3's budget coverage, budget 2023, that is. Deputy Prime Minister now moving into additional support for lower income families. Don't worry, we'll bring it back in time. But gentlemen, just very quickly, on the back of all that, you guys planning to have another kid? I mean, 2 weeks to 4 weeks is okay.
Are we still of childbearing age in this room? I don't know, but I checked mine. I'm not. So maybe the three of you.
For the men, it's okay. It's more the ladies harder.
Yes.
Okay, it's getting awkward. But what do you think of those measures? Get out of this.
Okay. Let me start off first. I guess this is just like what you're talking about, right? So, essentially, the whole reversing that fertility rate.
Mhm.
Yep. Not quite. It's
Is it
quite,
a
it's
sink?
very. It's not. Is it this the sink? I am
Medium
quite sure.
sink.
This is quite comprehensive. I think this will. I mean, it shows a bit, quite a fair bit of commitment from the government's part to address this. And like what we talked about earlier, right? If you are addressing this portion of the equation, right, where it is more closely tied with the financial part, right? At least it gives the one factor. There are other factors, of course, to consider, but at least the government is dealing with a factor that they can deal with right now.
So there's the money part. There's the support part as well with paternity leave and also for domestic care, I believe is what I heard earlier. What else do you think can be done better, or will this be for now?
I think we have to see this as is this going to be a progressive kind of thing when the next number comes out for fertility rate, if there's a slight improvement, and then they will be adding more, or if the rate still doesn't move, they will need to change tack and they look at other areas. But I think for now, this is really as good as the sink.
So we will mark this date February 14, 2023, and then
see what's the effect after 9 months.
Nice and theatrical. Harvey, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is why the DPM said that this was going to be a Valentine's Day budget.
It's interesting, and Eugene, feel free to jump in anytime here. the notion of flexi work arrangements, flexi care, I mean, some of us would say, well, that's the whole problem. When you throw in an extra 2 weeks for fathers to get involved, there is this push for dads to get more involved in families. And obviously, it'll help the mother, right? The female.
Oh, definitely, right. I think it is a right move. But I think in the end, it does reflect, that very deep concern with our population numbers. Now, whether these suite of new arrangements, bonuses, and all will work, I think it remains to be seen. But I think coming to the point about work-life balance, I think that's the challenge, right? How do you ensure that companies, employers, and all will enable younger employees and older colleagues will also give time and space for their young colleagues to be on their parenthood journey. So it really requires they say the whole village, right? The whole village to raise a child, and again you can see that they are doing everything that they could to stop this downward fertility trend.
All right, we got to get back to Deputy Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who is talking about the government's investments in early childhood sector. A little bit later on, he'll also tackle the issue of Healthier SG. It's back to our Parliament feed.
Childhood sector. Over the last decade, our spending on the early childhood sector has grown to 6 times its original size, from $320 million in FY 2013 to about $1.9 billion in FY 2022. Lower income families now pay as little as $3 a month for full-day childcare in an anchor-operator preschool. And these investments have had an impact. The preschool enrollment rate of children aged 5 to 6 years old residing in public rental flats is now comparable to the national average. But for children aged 3 to 4 years old residing in public rental flats, the preschool enrollment is 80%, lower than the national average of about 88%. So we will continue to provide additional assistance to lower income families and reach out to them to facilitate their children's preschool enrollment. At the same time, over the next 2 years, we will work with anchor operators to create 22,000 more full-day childcare places and expand the number of MOE kindergartens. This will help support higher preschool participation rates across the board and especially amongst lower income families. At the other end of the demographic spectrum, Singapore is one of the fastest aging nations in the world. By 2030, 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be aged 65 and above, up from 1 in 6 today. While many are living longer, some do spend their final years in ill health. And this, coupled with smaller household sizes, will mean an increased burden of care for families. Nursing homes are suitable for the elderly with high care needs and little to no family support. But we cannot rely on nursing homes as the mainstream solution. In fact, many seniors themselves prefer to be cared for in the community and to grow old in an environment that is familiar to them, surrounded by their loved ones. We will therefore need to review and update our approaches to aged care to ensure seniors live as much of their lives in good health as possible and have ample options to age in the community. Our first line of defense is that of preventive care, and that is why our priority is to support seniors to take care of their own health, including by remaining physically and mentally active and staying engaged in their communities. And that's why we have introduced Healthier SG as an empowering strategy so that seniors can take preventive care steps, together with their doctors and community partners to improve their health. This will enable seniors to keep chronic illnesses at bay, or if they do contract them, to detect the diseases early so that these can be kept under control. The refreshed Action Plan for Successful Aging, launched last month, supports Healthier SG by setting out a comprehensive set of initiatives for seniors to better care for themselves, continue contributing, and stay connected. But for seniors to stay active and healthy, or to better manage their existing chronic illnesses, they will need stronger support in the community, outside of hospitals and clinics. So as part of the Forward Singapore exercise, we are studying how we can enhance the range of care and support options within the community. This includes reviewing the operating model of active aging centers, and examining how we can better strengthen and coordinate the providers in the aged care sector, which is highly fragmented today. In the meantime, we will increase the resources dedicated to supporting seniors, especially lower income seniors with their long-term care and healthcare needs. I will top up the Elder Care Fund by $500 million to support means-tested subsidies for seniors who need home-based, center-based, or institutional care. I will also top up the MediFund by $1.5 billion to strengthen the safety net for lower income individuals and seniors facing financial difficulties with their medical bills, even after government subsidies, MediShield Life and MediSave. As our population ages, we will also have to address the retirement needs of Singaporeans. We have enhanced the CPF system over the years, such as through workfare and extra interest on lower CPF balances. We now have silver support to supplement the retirement income of seniors who had low incomes in their working years. And we also encourage family members with more means to top up their loved one's CPF through tax reliefs and matching grants. We are considering what more we can do to enhance retirement adequacy in our Forward Singapore deliberations. Meanwhile, in this budget, I will make several moves to help specific segments. In particular, the government had earlier convened the Advisory Committee on Platform Workers to look into strengthening protections for platform workers, including improving their housing and retirement adequacy. The government has accepted the committee's recommendations, one of which was to align the CPF contribution rates of platform workers and companies with those of employees and employers over a period of 5 years. So platform workers who are below 30 years old when the changes are implemented will be required to make increased CPF contributions. And platform companies will also be required to pay CPF contributions for these platform workers. These changes will help platform workers raise their total earnings and strengthen their housing and retirement adequacy. But in the short term, they will affect the take-home pay of these workers. I will therefore introduce additional support to help lower income platform workers cushion the impact. For the first 4 years after implementation, I will provide a CPF transition support to lower income platform workers who see an increase in their CPF contribution rates. More information on this transition support is in the annex, and the Manpower Minister will also share more at the SCOS. We will also make some CPF adjustments for older workers in line with the recommendations of the Tripartite Work Group on Older Workers. We implemented the first increase in CPF contribution rates for senior workers in 2022 and the second increase earlier this year. For these two increases, the government had provided employers with a CPF transition offset to alleviate the increase in business costs. We will continue with the next increase in CPF contribution rates in 2024 and likewise provide employers with a similar offset. In addition, I will increase the minimum CPF monthly payout for seniors on the Retirement Sum Scheme to $350 a month. I will also help middle-income Singaporeans save more for their retirement by raising the CPF monthly salary ceiling. The CPF salary ceilings were last raised in 2016. To keep pace with rising salaries, we will raise the monthly salary ceiling from $6,000 to $8,000 in 2026. We will phase in the increases over 4 years, starting from this year, to allow employers and employees adjust to the changes. Mr. Speaker, sir, the measures in this budget are part of our overall efforts to strengthen our social compact, and to build a fairer and more inclusive society. We still have more to do, and we will continue this important work as part of Forward Singapore.
It is Money FM 89.3's Budget 2023 coverage as our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong now talks about the building of a resilient nation portion of the budget. We'll get back to him in just a bit. In the studio with us, of course, our panel of experts. We've got Alvin Liu, Senior Economist, UOB, Harvey Koenig, Partner, Energy and Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology, Tax, KPMG in Singapore, and Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law, Singapore Management University. Timothy Goh and myself, Elliot Danker, in with you. We just heard about the increase in CPF contribution rates.
A CPF monthly salary ceiling as well will be raised. This is to help middle income Singaporeans save up for their retirement, and also to keep pace with rising salaries. The Deputy Prime Minister Wong there said the monthly salary ceiling will be raised from $6,000 to $8,000 in 2026.
Bit of a shake-up there in the various CPF schemes.
Yeah,
Which should be good.
I guess in a way, yes, it is for many of the Singaporeans who are contributing to this one as well. So another thing that the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned, of course, is that the government will continue with the next increase of CPF contribution rates next year, 2024. This is for senior workers aged 55 to 70 from January 1st, 2024. To enhance retirement adequacy. So what will this mean for people who are working, especially for the seniors who are still working?
This is definitely the motivation is first on the retirement needs, and because if you look at broad picture, we are living longer. There's more productive life in working life for a lot more people. But at the same time, the retirement cost is also going to be an issue.
So does this mean work more while you're productive so that you can retire more comfortably when you need to retire?
At least they are trying to plan for the adequacy for that area. And for the seniors itself, definitely that it is actually, I will put it in more recognition that they are doing this a fairer share, I guess, for them.
So what happens then to people who just want to give up, throw up the towel? Hey, I'm done working. I'm 60. I don't know what the age of retirement now in Singapore legally is, and I don't want to work anymore.
Well, that is a good problem. You see, for that person is a good problem.
No, for somebody who said probably, I think I've had enough. I've saved enough for my own retirement, and I'm comfortable enough.
Again, I can't speak for personal choices. I do know of people who they work intensely for the first 20 years of their life, and they for the next remainder of their lives they play golf.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that is not for everyone. I will agree. And if it is when you have start a family, that retirement period may be extended. And I think this addresses about the adequacy of that retirement, and I think it's quite timely, as you have put it, that salaries have been increasing, and the ceiling, for example, to increase it is a timely move.
Yeah. Let's also talk about encouraging family members with more means to top up their loved one's CPF through tax reliefs, matching grants. Harvey, after hearing that, any thoughts on this particular matter?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it's also a part of the government's initiative to ensure that while we talk about retirement adequacy, it's not just self that is contributing to retirement. If you can rely on family members, I think that's also part of the thinking.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think with the costs going up, and we can only see inflation adding on to that cost. Obviously, the cost of retiring is going to get higher. And so I think certainly all these measures are going to get more timely for everybody.
Eugene, plus the health issue as well. I mean, talking about MediSave accounts as well as part of this whole segment in that sense.
No, Elliot, I think, increasingly there is a concern whether CPF is fit for purpose. Right? And so, I think in recent years, they've been trying in an incremental way to boost retirement adequacy. And so all these changes over the last years, including those that just been announced, are really about trying to refresh the system. And I think in hopefully, with plans for a workplace discrimination law, I hope it undoes, the ageism mindsets that sometimes we have at workplaces. You're old, you're older, and so you're less, you contribute less, and so you might do the same work, but what the company pays you in terms of your employer contributions will be less than the younger colleague, and I think that's utterly discriminatory. So hopefully this will roll back what has been done in previous years, where the older you get, the employer's contribution as well as the employee's contributions got reduced. And I think it's time to stop those sort of practices. So I welcome that.
Gentlemen, we'll continue to get your thoughts in just a while. Quick commercial break, and then we go back to Budget 2023. Right now, of course, our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong talking about economic and infrastructure resilience. We're back with that budget broadcast in 2 minutes.
On 15th February at 6:20 p.m., in support of Total Defence Day, SCDF will be sounding the important message signal through the island-wide public warning system sirens and the SG Secure mobile app. Please do not be alarmed. When you hear the signal, tune in immediately to any local radio station or free-to-air TV channel for a brief message on the public warning system. This message is brought to you by the SCDF.
Prioritizing your finances with Money FM 89.3.
Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
Strengthening our resilience against the larger existential threat of global warming and climate change. We have started to prepare for this. We have accelerated the low carbon transition for Singapore to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. We are raising the carbon tax progressively over the next few years to provide a stronger price signal and impetus to reduce our carbon footprint. We are supporting our enterprises and households to become more energy efficient. We are greening our buildings and going for cleaner vehicles. We are harvesting solar energy, transiting to cleaner energy sources like hydrogen, and working with our neighbors to develop regional power grids. In short, we are doing everything we can to fight climate change. But we also know that our efforts alone will not be enough. The rest of the world must also do their part. Unfortunately, in the short term, many countries are increasing their reliance on fossil fuels, increasing their reliance to prevent the lights from going out and to provide for energy security. This simply means that the world will have to redouble its efforts to get back on track with the plans to keep global temperatures from rising beyond a threshold that will result in irreversible damage. While we will do our best to shape and drive this international agenda, we must also prepare for the worst. And that means taking steps to adapt to global warming and especially to rising sea levels. We are now building a polder at Pulau Tekong. It is already more than halfway complete and is set to finish by end 2024. The experience gained from this project will give us more options to protect our coastline against rising sea levels. We have also set up a coastal and flood protection fund with an initial injection of $5 billion to support the construction of coastal and drainage infrastructure. And since then, the teams have been conducting site-specific studies for drainage enhancements and coastal protection, starting with the stretch from the city to East Coast. We expect climate-related spending to go up significantly in the medium term, and we will commit more resources as we progressively implement these extensive infrastructure plans. Be it a pandemic an economic crisis or rising sea levels, we have been systematically planning forward to give ourselves more options and solutions to cope with future shocks. But we will not be able to anticipate and cater for every scenario. Furthermore, no amount of buffers or redundancies in our system can mitigate the extreme scenarios of blockades, conflict, wars, or climate disasters. Just look at the extent of destruction and damage that has happened in Ukraine. The cost of rebuilding the country has been estimated at several hundreds of billions of dollars, and that figure is only expected to grow as the war continues. So our best safeguard in any crisis remains having access to the financial reserves we have accumulated over decades of prudent government. Ultimately, our reserves are our greatest insurance. They allow us to respond quickly to immediate needs in an emergency without compromising the focus on the longer term. They enable us to bounce back stronger, as has happened during the global financial crisis in 2008 and most recently in this COVID-19 pandemic. And if we were ever to be hit by a bigger calamity or disaster, our reserves will provide us the resources to rebuild Singapore. Aside from financial reserves, the most critical ingredient of national resilience is our people. When there is a high level of solidarity and trust amongst our citizens, and when Singaporeans feel a strong sense of collective ownership and responsibility for each other, we will be able to withstand any shocks together. And this is why we are continually reviewing and updating our policies to keep our social fabric strong and resilient. And we do so from a position of strength. Over decades of engagement and hard work, we have expanded the common stakes we have with one another. We have kept faith with each other and avoided the fissures that have divided so many other countries. In the last 3 years of the pandemic, we have seen many ground-up initiatives by diverse groups looking after the more vulnerable amongst us, regardless of race or religion. Singaporeans have also donated generously. Despite the economic downturn due to COVID-19, the donations received through Giving.sg were about 3 times higher than pre-pandemic levels and have remained at about $100 million in the last 3 years. We must sustain this spirit of giving, and the government will continue to do our part to foster this. One way is through tax-deductible donations to institutions of a public character or IPCs and eligible institutions. Our tax deduction for donations at 250% is in fact already very high compared to other jurisdictions. Nevertheless, we will extend this tax deduction rate for another 3 years till end 2026, and we will review thereafter what would be a more sustainable level of tax deduction for the longer term. We will also continue to encourage businesses to do their part in corporate giving. Many are already doing so, going beyond cash donations to skills-based volunteering and inclusive hiring. We will enhance the existing business and IPC partnership scheme into a broader corporate volunteer scheme, which will be rolled out for 3 years. The scope of eligible activities for tax incentives under the scheme will be expanded. And we will also double the qualifying per IPC cap to $100,000 per calendar year to facilitate deeper partnerships between businesses and IPCs. Our charities, social service agencies or SSAs, and community organizations play critical roles in looking after the vulnerable and mobilizing Singaporeans to support those in greater need. We will continue to strengthen their capabilities and support their services. We have completed a review of social service salary benchmarks and will work with the SSAs to raise salaries so as to better attract and retain talent in the social service sector. And the Minister for Social and Family Development will share more at the COS. In this budget, I will top up the Community Silver Trust by $1 billion to support our SSAs that deliver community care services for our seniors. The Community Silver Trust provides dollar-for-dollar matching grants for the SSAs and will enable them to enhance the quality and accessibility of community care, especially for the more vulnerable seniors. Charities and SSAs can also continue to tap on the Charities Capability Fund and the Community Capability Trust to drive innovation and transform their operations. I will also provide a $10 million top-up to the self-help groups over the next 3 years. They are doing good work on the ground and are well placed to provide assistance to members of their respective communities who need help. Sir, tomorrow is Total Defense Day. We are reminded that every citizen and every sector of society has a part to play in ensuring Singapore's security and defending our way of life. Indeed, our efforts to strengthen our overall resilience must reflect the values that motivate us as a people and as a nation. We want a Singapore where we not only do the best for ourselves, but also help our fellow citizens succeed. And that is how we keep Singapore strong, resilient, and united. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, please allow me to say a few words in Mandarin.
You're listening to Money FM 89.3's coverage of Budget 2023. Our Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong now delivering the Mandarin portion of the speech. He will return in just a while and cover the area of fortifying our fiscal position, with our efforts to grow the economy and strengthen our social safety nets. What else will the government look into? In the studio with us this afternoon are our guests, our expert panel, Alvin Liu, Senior Economist, UOB, Avi Coding, Partner Energy and Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology, Tax, KPMG in Singapore, and Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law, Singapore Management University. It's more of the same, gentlemen, in the sense that you want to give tax deductions to encourage this culture of giving and volunteering. More of the same continues with this year's budget. Could I generally get your thoughts on this issue? Alvin, could I start with you?
I think it's always a good thing, right? The act of giving and to encourage it, and it reflects giving society and
Topping up self-help groups as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're not exactly surprised that this thing was extended.
Yeah. Harvey, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you look at the ones that will benefit from tax deduction is probably the higher income earners.
Yeah.
So obviously, it is also a way for the government to try and say, I want to channel, what the higher income earners earn to the people who are actually need it more within society. So in a way, also that strengthens what we call the social resilience or social compact that I think DPM was talking about earlier.
It's interesting, Eugene, because there's always going to be this conversation of a wealth tax that keeps coming up. And I think we've had this discussion before on do we need a cultural reset or a cultural marker in that sense? COVID surely has provided that. And now you see government officials really ramp up on this notion of help on them, the give back. But yeah, the government is here to help you as well.
Oh, definitely, right? And so I think here the idea, that the government shouldn't always be the
motherly
first
government in that
call.
sense.
Yes,
Yeah.
that ultimately, as what Harvey pointed out, it is important for Singaporeans, to help one another, right? And I think that helps to reduce the demand on the public coffers, right? If people are willing to pay it forward, to keep this virtuous circle going, and if incentives help, then hopefully people make it a habit, to think about those who are less fortunate. And so the question is whether, the giving that we saw, in a way, rise significantly during the last recent pandemic, whether that will continue, as we go towards an endemic stage of the pandemic. So I think, extending the 250% tax deduction, to 2026, I think is a step in the right direction. I just hope that people see, the value in giving, whether individually or as a corporate entity, and for which there is also measures being introduced.
Is this something of a new phenomenon that Singaporeans are more giving now than before from your observation? I haven't been observing, but from last week during the when the call out from Giving.sg came out for the earthquake relief, for example, from Turkey, they originally pledged like what, 100,000, I believe, and then that ballooned from donations alone to over $1 million in a few days. So is this something that is because of the pandemic, or was it always like this even before that? And because for this one, there are no incentives as well. So we can see that Singaporeans are giving even though there are no tax breaks for this one.
Yeah, I mean the earthquake in Turkey, really, jokes at people and and in a way calls out the best of the humanity in us. But I think in many ways we haven't yet developed that culture of giving. And so this is something which I think we should, particularly those who have benefited from the system. I think they should contribute more to society, because I think that helps to to recognize that we're all interdependent, we're all linked to each other, right? And the system will not work if the disadvantaged continue to not thrive in the system, such that even those who are advantaged will find that the system cannot hold. So I think that that's certainly a step in the right direction. I don't think we are yet in that culture of giving, and
So we still need the incentives to give.
and Tim, when I talk about giving, it's not just about money, right?
It's
Because
time.
actually, in the affluent society, that's the easiest thing to give.
Mhm.
It is about time. It is about contributing your expertise. That I think will take a lot more. A lot more nurturing, and hopefully, we will be able to move in that direction sooner rather than later.
To add, right, I think companies are playing a role as well. As those companies that have annual kind of volunteering activities, they have fundraising for certain those activities gives people exposure, not just about giving money, but also spending time with the people that they are trying to help. So those exposure, I think gradually it grows on you, and you get once you get the opportunity, right? You know what you're doing, then you do more. I think in the past perhaps there was less opportunities where unless you step out and go and find it. But now I think companies are also playing that role.
All right, gentlemen, we've got to cross back to Parliament, where Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong is now talking about fortifying our fiscal position.
Applies to all purchases or receipt of gifts of immovable properties in Singapore. I will introduce higher marginal buyer stamp duty rates for higher value residential and non-residential properties. For residential properties, the portion of the value of the property in excess of $1.5 million and up to $3 million will be taxed at 5%, while that in excess of $3 million will be taxed at 6%, up from the current rate of 4%. The changes are expected to affect 15% of residential properties. The additional conveyance duties regime will also be adjusted accordingly. For non-residential properties, the portion of the value of the property in excess of $1 million and up to $1.5 million will be taxed at 4%, while that in excess of $1.5 million will be taxed at 5%, up from the current rate of 3%. And these changes are expected to affect 60% of non-residential properties. The changes to the BSD regime will apply to all properties acquired from tomorrow. This is expected to generate an additional $500 million in revenue per year, but the actual amount will depend on the state of the property market. I had adjusted vehicle taxes last year, but there is still scope to make them more progressive. I will therefore adjust the additional registration fee or ARF rates to better differentiate between the higher end cars and also tax luxury cars at a higher rate. Buyers of cars with open market value or OMV of more than 40,000 will pay higher marginal ARF rates than they do today. And in particular, for the highest OMV tier, the revised ARF rates will be 320%, up from 220% today. Currently, the preferential ARF rebates are sized as a percentage of the payable ARF. I will cap the preferential ARF rebates at $60,000 to avoid providing excessive rebates to more expensive cars when they are deregistered. These changes are expected to affect the top 1/3 of cars by OMV. Buyers of cars with an OMV of 40,000 or less will not be affected. The new ARF structure and the preferential ARF cap will apply to all cars registered with COEs obtained from the next round of COE bidding. The ARF change is expected to generate about $200 million in additional revenue per year, but again, the actual amount will depend on the state of the vehicle market. To discourage the consumption of tobacco products, I will implement a 15% increase in tobacco excise duty across all tobacco products with effect from today. The increase is expected to generate about $100 million in additional revenue per year. I will also make some tax adjustments to support businesses and strengthen our competitiveness, as well as to enhance the fairness and resilience of our tax system. And the details of these tax changes are in the annex to the budget. Our corporate tax system will be affected by BEPS 2.0. Pillar 2 of BEPS will introduce a global minimum effective tax rate of 15% for large M&E groups. However, many jurisdictions have not announced their implementation plans. Some key parameters of Pillar 2 have only been finalized this year, while others remain under discussion at the international level. The EU recently announced its plans to implement Pillar 2 in phases, starting effectively from 2024. Other jurisdictions like the UK and Switzerland have announced their intention to do the same. As the rules will be implemented progressively, the full effects will only be felt in 2025 or later. Given these developments, I intend to implement Pillar 2 from 2025 as part of the broader international move to align minimum global corporate tax rates for large M&E groups. When we do so, we will implement a domestic top-up tax, which will top up the M&E group's effective tax rate in Singapore to 15%. At the same time, we will review and update our broader suite of industry development schemes to ensure that Singapore remains competitive in attracting and retaining investments. That said, the developments on BEPS are fluid, and we will continue to monitor international developments. If there are additional delays, we will adjust our implementation timelines. We will continue to engage companies and give them sufficient notice well ahead of any changes to our tax rules or schemes. So let me now summarize our overall fiscal position. For FY 2022, as I mentioned just now, I expect an overall deficit of $2 billion or 0.3% of GDP. For FY 2023, I expect an overall slight deficit of $0.4 billion or 0.1% of GDP. This is appropriate for the projected economic conditions this year. Nevertheless, we will have drawer plans in place to take swift action should downside economic scenarios materialize. For the last 3 financial years, we've had to draw on the past reserves to cope with the unexpected shocks and disruptions of the pandemic. As things return to normal, we will not need to make any draw on the past reserves in this year's budget. In May 2020, the government raised the contingencies funds balance from $3 billion to $16 billion to ensure we could respond quickly to urgent and unforeseen cash flow needs arising from the fast evolving pandemic. With the return to normalcy, I will reduce the balance of the contingencies fund from $16 billion to $6 billion. This will ensure adequate resources for unforeseen circumstances while retaining discipline in how we manage our finances. Today, we can increase the balances in the contingencies fund, but there is no legal mechanism to make a reduction. We will hence amend the Constitution for this purpose, and the government will be tabling a bill for first reading later this month. Mr. Speaker, this budget is about moving forward in a new era, a period of great uncertainty and troubles in the external environment, which will pose formidable challenges for all of us. We are taking comprehensive measures to help Singaporeans tide through the immediate cost of living pressures. Importantly, we are making decisive moves to secure Singapore's prospects by growing our economy, equipping our workers, strengthening our social compact, and building a more resilient nation. These moves are part of the broader strategy for our next bound of development, which we are co-creating with Singaporeans through the Forward Singapore exercise. The road ahead will not be easy, but it has never been and will never be that easy for us. We are a little red dot, a country that was never meant to be. We are more exposed and vulnerable than others to external forces beyond our control. And in our short history since independence, we have repeatedly faced crisis and will continue to do so. But we have never shied away from adversity and challenges. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and our pioneer generation set the tone for how we should respond with grit and tenacity, and with the courage to dream big and turn these dreams into reality. And since then, successive generations of Singaporeans have sustained the hard work to take Singapore forward. This is why we are in a much stronger position today. We have also emerged from the last 3 years of COVID-19 more united than before. There is a high regard around the world for the Singapore brand, our honesty, integrity, and reliability. Investors trust us. They see advantage in our tripartite system, our open economy, and our cohesive society. These are fundamentals that will set us apart. But our real strength is in our people, who we are and what we stand for. We are a people with an indomitable and never say die spirit. We are quick in adapting and responding to changes in the world. We believe in stretching ourselves, pursuing excellence, and striving to do better. And we strive not just for ourselves and our families, but also for those around us. Because we are also a caring, gracious, and generous people. We treat each other as equals, we respect and look out for one another, and we are ever ready to extend a helping hand to those in need. We see this spirit in Singaporeans like Miss Emily Yap, who is a registered nurse at Alexandra Hospital. Emily has been hard at work at the COVID front lines. Despite this heavy workload, she still volunteers on her off days to care for the wider community. She draws inspiration from her grandmother, who also worked as a nurse her whole life. So Emily started a ground-up initiative with other like-minded young people. During the pandemic, she and her fellow volunteers helped to deliver grocery packs to the elderly and lower-income families in her community. She also used her CDC vouchers, not for herself, but to buy kueh bangkit from her neighborhood bakery and shared them with vulnerable families over the Lunar New Year. Sir, this is what the Singapore spirit is about. And we have seen this in action and experienced it in abundance over the last 3 years. How we are responsible for one another, keep an eye out for our fellow citizens, and always band together as a team. And as one united people, we can move forward with confidence in this new era and shape a brighter future and a better Singapore together. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
There you have it. That was our coverage of Budget 2023. Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, of course, delivering the budget in Parliament. We have a lot to get through, including some closing thoughts. But I think first things first, Tian Tian, you have some questions with regard to our fiscal position at the tail end of that speech there.
Yeah, our fiscal position as well as the number of tax adjustment or adjustments to the tax system here. We have higher buyer stamp duty for higher value properties. We also have some taxes on luxury cars as well as tobacco excise duty here. So I just want to pose the question to our panelists, maybe starting with Harvey. Which one really stood out to you today?
Well, I think certainly the higher stamp duties.
That's on top of everyone's mind.
Yeah, but of course, I think it's not unexpected. I think basically the painting was on the wall since the last budget, and that we're talking about wealth taxes and what and they could look like going forward. I think certainly in last year's budget, the minister has already indicated move towards getting those who are less well off to basically contribute more to revenue. And so I think the announcements in this budget has been going along the same vein. I guess maybe what was probably still expected was that there was not going to be any further announcement on increases in personal tax, which was I think something everybody was looking for. But certainly, I think the direction around whether Singapore will also introduce a wealth tax, I think that wasn't fully explored in this budget. A wealth tax along the lines of something like estate duty or gift taxes or inheritance tax. So it appears that I think the minister said last year that they were still studying it. There's no indication in this budget. So I think maybe that's still an open question going forward.
And one quick question before we go to look at the fiscal position for FY 2023. I want to get your thoughts as well, Alvin and Prof. Tan. What do you think about the tax adjustments? Which one really stood out to you this time around?
Okay, let me just go first. Like Harvey, right? Yeah, I think those tax adjustments, it's a continuation of what happened in 2022, right? On the wealth-related kind of tax, whereby they picked up the more expensive cars, the higher value. So again, this is I don't think this was surprising, but yeah. The other one on the cigarettes, yes. I think this is also quite. I think this is also a health consideration. But of course, we will have to see what's the consequences of this. And I think as was reported in some media reports that there is a vaping culture, and that might be there might be some issues. I think this will remain to be seen because I think the increase itself is quite significant as a one-time increase of the excise duty by 15%.
Very much tweaked into the tax system. I don't know whether they will make a major move on revamping, the tax system, right? So if you look at these three adjustments,
right?
They will add probably about 7.8 billion Singapore dollars, to the public coffers. Every bit counts, but it is not going to, help to make up the difference with higher social expenditures. So we still await that big bang in our tax system if it ever happens. And I think the government seems keen to just move incrementally. But I think the longer they kick the can down the road, I think the more the spending, the gap between spending and revenues will show up.
And talking about spending revenues, Singapore expected to see an overall deficit of $0.4 billion. We are talking about 0.1% GDP for FY 2023. Prof, to what extent is this in line with your expectations?
I think it comes as close as is possible towards a balanced budget. And I think when the figures are finally all totted up, I wouldn't be surprised if the deficit is even smaller, or maybe there might even be a very, very small surplus. But I think here, there is a recognition that, as the pandemic sort of wears down in terms of its severity, the imperative becomes, to have a balanced budget. I think the finance minister indicated earlier in his early speech, that it is unlikely that they would be able to return, whatever's been taken from the past reserves. And I think the least they could do, in line with his emphasis throughout his speech, about fiscal prudence, fiscal discipline, would be to have, at least a balanced budget.
Right. And Elliot, maybe we could get on with the closing thoughts as well.
I didn't win any free coffee. That was a little bit disappointing. Yeah, we will get into those closing thoughts in just a while. But and as part of that, before we get into that, I think Prof. Eugene, I do want to talk to you about this simply because you teach law. The increase in the tobacco tax. What should the government consider here with the point that Alvin brought up, and how that could lead to more illegal vaping because it is illegal in Singapore?
Oh yeah, I think because the cost of smoking cigarettes, will now be much higher. I mean, it was really high to begin. It is really high to begin with. Then I think some people might consider, whether vaping, despite it being illegal, it would be a more affordable alternative. And I think that's something which I'm sure the authorities would have thought of. But I think but one hopes that it is not an unintended consequence. Because I think that would be bad. So we'll have to see. There were concerns raised about whether enforcement against vaping is adequate. But I think we can imagine, smokers, will now be doing their sums, and seeing whether that there might be a more sustainable alternative. If I can put it that way.
But you see, the whole point of this 15% increase is to discourage the use of cigarettes, right? For health purposes.
But my understanding, Tim, of smoker psychology is that prices are not really going to. If you are really addicted, prices are. Yes, you might cut down a bit, but I don't think you're really going to go off cigarettes completely.
Every little bit would help, maybe.
Perhaps, right? But this is where people will consider alternatives, right? Whether that means buying more. Duty-free cigarettes on your way back, from the overseas visit.
How about going for a run instead?
No, it's supposed to promote a healthy life, right? But instead, I have many smoker friends. It's their addiction. There's no issue, and I can imagine some of them with a good sense of humor would say, "Oh, that means I cannot waste. I really smoke until the orange part." Until the filter,
or calculate it down and see how much money
Yeah.
you're going to be spending on buying cigarettes in a year, and where that will take you on a trip, for example.
But Tim, people spend in a way, just a lot of money as well on lotteries and all, But but if you do the calculation, the likelihood of you beating the house, is actually so small. How many of us here really want it big at the lotteries? But still, people gamble. People try their luck.
Or perhaps changing their mindset, and this is what you're doing for your country, your 15% tax.
True. Okay, we're going to take a short break before we come back with closing thoughts. Quite a bit to get through. Harvey, you don't have to answer this question. Why is it tobacco tax is always targeted and not alcohol tax?
Money FM Budget Conversations 2023 is presented by UOB in partnership with KPMG. UOB, building the future of ASEAN.
People say I'm the life of the party, 'cause I tell a joke or two. Although I might be laughing loud and hearty, deep inside I'm blue. So take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace the tracks of my tears. I need you. Since you left me, if you see me with another girl, seeming like I'm having fun. Although she may be cute, she's just a substitute. Cause you're the permanent one. So take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy to trace the tracks of my jeans. Oh, I need you. I need you. I'm masquerading. My hope is fading. Since you put me down, my smile is my makeup. I wear since my breakup with you. Baby, take a good look at my face. You'll see my smile looks out of place. If you look closer, it's easy. The tracks of my tears now, baby, baby, baby.
To the end of the Budget 2023 announcement by Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong, of course, in the studio, getting a reaction, an immediate reaction to the budget. Alvin Liu, Senior Economist, UOB. Harvey Koenig, Partner, Energy and Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology Tax, KPMG in Singapore, as well as Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law, Singapore Management University. I suppose let's go around the room first, Tim. Biggest surprise from this year's budget announcement? Alvin, you're the leader. Start us off.
Okay. I think biggest surprise, like what Harvey said, was the extent of the fertility related.
Yeah, we were talking about this off air.
Yeah. I mean, we often try to talk more about it, but then again, I was reminded by your colleague Rachel 2 days ago that the previous budget there was not much in terms of those measures. So this could be the recent fertility number that came out probably was a good wake up call.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in that sense, and we get this, and the other part, of course, that we were quite surprised that for 2022 budget, right, it was still a slight deficit because we saw that the operating revenue was quite significantly higher for the corporate tax revenue and also the personal income tax portion. But going forward to the 2023, right, the budgeted one for a slight deficit, we think that is pretty much in line with the outlook of what a certain year in terms of economic outlook as well as elevated inflation, right? That kind of numbers should actually put us in good, it's like expansionary, so that is a good position to be in.
Yeah, I think certainly apart from the parenthood measures, I think was pleasantly surprised by the announcement of the Enterprise Innovation Scheme, which was a broad-based scheme to try and encourage companies to continue investing in R&D and innovation and training. And so I think that while government has always talked about that continuing to invest in R&D, so far it's been mostly very much targeted schemes at specific industry groups. So this enterprise innovation scheme, I think, is certainly going to be very welcome and going to be a good one for particularly SMEs going forward to really continue to invest in this uncertain environment in particular.
Well, off air, I did say, I mean, Tim agreed with me. If the men could do the childbearing and giving birth, I would volunteer.
And
Even
we
though
get
it's-
6 months paternity too.
yeah, why not, right?
Perhaps the innovation fund, right?
Innovation.
There
we go. Schwarzenegger effect.
Yes. will see an era will give you some hope that it might come.
So that's a call out there for innovative companies to take advantage of the grants and come up with a way for men to bear children. Again, I'm not of childbearing age anymore, so it's not going to happen in my
Age thing
lifetime.
coming up again. Neither am I. Prof. Eugene, any surprises in this year's budget?
I think in a way, the finance minister had said that there will be a lot of goodies. When he said that it is going to be a Valentine's Day budget. So the accent was clearly on younger Singaporeans, young families and all. But there are things for everyone, right? So if you think about the concerns with retirement adequacy, platform workers, ex-offenders, people with disabilities, I think there is something for everyone. But I think this budget was also very concerned about the pain points for people. So you saw, last week, the debate over public housing affordability and accessibility. I thought that took a fairly prominent position, in this year's budget. Yes, I think in the end, the pro-natal, pro-family measures, I think in a way could reflect the policymakers' concern, that if we continue on this downward trend in terms of our total fertility rate, that's going to have significant impact, on the economy, and whatnot. So I think overall, I think there's a lot, to say about this budget, including, right, that the 3 billion top up, to the assurance package. I think to deal with this inflation concerns and all. Although there was also, the finance minister's caution, and if I could quote him, quote, not physically sustainable to rely so heavily on government support year after year to cope with inflation, unquote. So again, whether that could be a signal, that this high level of support, to deal with cost of living concerns, is something that Singaporeans should not get used to.
Was there, gentlemen, enough that you heard perhaps for the SMEs, towards the smaller business operators? I don't think I heard enough sort of assistance for this group of people. There are grants, but they might be too complicated for them to apply, or even for the sustainability grant might be a little bit too much for a small company to have to switch to an energy efficient anything in their operations to be able to get this grant.
Yeah, so I think none of the measures sort of, are not for the SMEs, but I take your point, Tim, that SMEs, could find it somewhat challenging.
Especially the smallers of the SMEs.
Correct, including, the Enterprise Innovation Scheme.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add to that, certainly, I think when you talk about grants and subsidies, this certainly requires a smaller companies to actually make an actual application to the relevant agency to be able to access the benefits. I think that has always been a bugbear, I guess, of many of the small businesses. So in a way, while we talk about the sustainability grants as still having to go through that process, the enterprise incentive scheme, on the other hand, is a tax deduction, a broad-based one, which I think does try to take a little bit out of that process out. So that basically what then happens is that basically as these small businesses prepare their annual tax return to IRAS, they basically would just take on this deduction and put it in as part of their returns. It is a relatively simple process for some of those. Of course, for when you're trying to claim expenses on R&D, for example, I think that's where it could get a bit difficult. Because then you have to explain why this is innovative and why it's actually research and development. So I think that's on the scheme. But I guess maybe the other aspect that is maybe somewhat missing is the support, short-term support for some of the smaller businesses or SMEs in the form of, like, say, a corporate tax rebate, or like in last year's budget, they had a business recovery grant to help businesses transit out of COVID. And this year, because of all the costs that we see due to supply chain shocks as well as inflation, there's none of that this year's budget. So maybe again, and that could be something that's missing in this budget. So
The key thing that was you probably didn't see also manpower
Yes,
related
yes,
grants.
I was going to get
The
that too. Yeah.
Of course, the good part is the DRCs for any of the there wasn't any adjustment, but then that is the only good takeaway from them, that they didn't make it tighter for some of the industries. But certainly you see that that's one thing that is
They didn't loosen it as well,
didn't
which
loosen it,
is what a
yeah.
lot of industries are calling for. I mean, if you go out and you see that lack of service staff or the tiredness in the current crop of service staff, people are calling for such a thing.
Yes, that's which is what is kind of quite clearly missing, like the manpower related measures. But it is what it is, I guess.
Apart from, of course, encouraging all of us to hire ex-offenders and people with disabilities and seniors. Pretty much that's all in terms of manpower help that we're going to get.
Yes.
So we are all going to have to look into this alternative too.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
the use of robots, or
Some industries just cannot use
Innovation.
robots.
Yeah, that's true.
So-
Yeah. Our industry, maybe. ChatGPT will take over this show. Glad ChatGPT is not coming up with the questions. It's us. Did you pay attention to this one, gentlemen? The help that will be given to families secure the BTO flats in a timely manner, including by giving them an additional ballot for their BTO flat applications. I guess that plus the question of what is this budget trying to make Singapore? More families? Obviously. Really a Valentine's Day message there? It takes so long to get a BTO.
more family friendly, so the idea that young families would have an additional shot. It doesn't guarantee them, because I think that would be seen as being too inequitable.
Sure.
But the idea that the likelihood of them being able to be selected, to ballot for an apartment, would be higher. But I think it tries to deal with the concerns that I think we saw being expressed in last week's Parliament's debate. And of course, it's something which I think the policymakers are not unfamiliar with, right? These complaints have been around for quite some time, and I think again it's tied with the parenthood and family package. The concern with whether all these given that we are in a way an unusual country, where certain things must be in place before procreation takes place. That the government is trying to accommodate these concerns.
Well, it definitely is a Valentine's Day message in that sense. With regard to, I mean, we talked about this earlier on, that whole flexible working arrangement. How, and then you just add the whole manpower issue, right? Is it a challenge then for companies to tackle, knowing that, I mean, men already have reservists, so that's 2 weeks out. I plucked it out from the back of my brain. Now you have this as well. Do you foresee potential challenges that companies might face? Gentlemen, any thoughts?
Maybe I can just say that I think when we talk about flexi work arrangements, I guess if we're looking at what happened during COVID.
Yeah.
I think we're not just talking about flexi, but we're talking about hybrid
Hybrid, yeah.
arrangements, work from home, and I think there's greater acceptance among employers that maybe hybrid could be the way to go. And I think certainly accommodating hybrid arrangement could actually be a solution to, in a way, flexi arrangement where you want to give people
Yeah.
time off as opposed to allowing people to work from home, which could certainly solve some of these problems. It is not just for families, but even to encourage people to work longer. For example, you're older, you're senior worker, and you don't want to travel to work so much, and that also gives you the flexibility to work from home. So I think if what came out of COVID that's positive could be really the hybrid working arrangements.
So taking into consideration that many companies, big or small, are finding it harder to attract talent, and by offering this kind of flexible working arrangements, do you think this will work, or will this be sustainable in the long run? In the Singapore context,
I think like what Harvey said, this is probably one of the things that accelerated the whole process of a hybrid work arrangement, because I think prior to that there has been some push, but then it's pretty hard, and there is a lot of
I mean, for
pushback
bosses, if you're not in
until
the
when
front,
we
you're
reach
not
this.
working. Right?
So I guess it's never let a tragedy or pandemic go to waste, right?
Good point.
Wow. That was
Yes.
neat.
The fact is that things are changing, and some companies, without that offer itself, it may be less attractive for some talent. And basically, the arrangement itself, I could also see that it allows people who may have for probably need to go back to their home country for
Right.
3 months.
Okay.
And yet you can't really let them. And if the flexible work arrangement is put in place and it becomes accepted, then all these questions or difficulties, right, would all have been worked out.
But then you have the tax issues where
Which
sometimes you need permit to
the-
work in the other country, which is really, I mean, personal opinion, I think it's a bit ridiculous that there's so many. But then it's government to government employment tax, so you can't really argue there.
But at least the fact that it allows that flexibility.
Yeah.
And it is I think it helps to retain. Otherwise, your staff that may just have to leave the job.
And I think you brought up a good point. It will also make Singapore a lot more attractive for foreign talent and companies who want to hire foreign talent to be able to hire these people and not have to work in Singapore, and they can work wherever they may be.
Yes, of course, the tax issues aside, this provides that. And if this becomes a norm, right?
Yeah.
And it really is like you don't provide it, you really become less attractive as an employer.
Quick closing thoughts, gentlemen. What do you think? Are we satisfied with budget 2023? What would Singaporeans perhaps be thinking right now? What would they want more? Prof. Eugene, start with you.
I'm always concerned about whether when people say whether they could have gotten more, from the budget. I think it's important to try to see the budget as, a way in which we try to balance, varying needs and priorities, in Singapore. I think overall, one would say that this budget, in a way, hits the right notes. As I said earlier, that I think different groups will say that they got something out of it. As someone in approaching the mid-50s, I like those that relate to retirement adequacy, particularly the CPF and all. But I think we began our discussion in talking about mindset changes, and hopefully the different announcements today nudge companies, individuals, and government itself, into some of these mindset changes. So we were talking earlier about all these measures for the family. The question is whether companies might then react in a negative way and say, I'm going to prefer people who are not in the family way or who are single, because I now got to plan for more maternity leave and paternity leave, I beg your pardon, and whatnot. So we need people to come on board, companies to come on board, to take in the right spirit, and to see how they could, contribute to this nation building effort. I think all these help to make Singapore, a better place. And companies need to try to see, that they have a part to play, and Money FM, being something in which is catered more to the business segment. Hopefully, people will see, in companies and all that they do have a role to play.
Alvin?
Definitely very the family-oriented part. Is quite key, quite striking. But then, okay, within it itself, right? Also, what we talk about, it addresses on the affordability and accessibility issue that they had debated. Could more have been done? We will have to see. But I think some of the areas, of course, the manpower, we talk about the manpower issues, that felt not really addressed. There's one area. It could be on on purpose, whereby they have already said that companies should innovate and use more technology to overcome this. But as Tim, there are companies that they simply couldn't. Not at this very short. And I'm also quite concerned that if we are going to see a huge pickup for in-person services in this year because of the reopening of especially China, right? Then some of these industries that require this extra manpower, they might be under a bit of strain. And coming in, of course, the issues of all the extra paternity leave is not coming in this year, but it is something that they will need to plan for. And it's going to be good for the long run, because if you can put an economic spin to it, right? If your population increases organically, right? That will add on to a lot of economic activity within the country itself, from childbirth to aging. That is that whole answer you are looking at. You should look at it. I will look at it that way. But I think in the short term, there will be issues because of the manpower related questions.
Teething issues, perhaps. Harvey, final word goes to you.
Yep. My takeaway is that this is actually quite a wide-ranging budget. Certainly, from talking about parenthood measures to retirement adequacy, to measures the usual measures we have for business resilience as well. But I think it all points towards really building future resilience. We keep hearing that resilience throughout the speech, but it's about future resilience. In building up a core of Singaporeans through the parenthood package that will take us through to adulthood. Building a core group of Singaporeans, and then for the retiree people who are ensuring that even going into retirement, they have enough to pay for things like medical as well as longer livelihoods as well. And then, of course, in terms of businesses, really ensuring that they gain resilience through transforming, innovating themselves. I think those seem to be the unifying theme for me.
So the first thing we're going to have to look out for will be the next 9 months from today. And we will see if all these, really the standout of this announcement is going to be effective enough for Singaporeans.
Maybe give it a bit more time.
Yeah, because the typical Singaporean will now calculate and see, the cost benefit analysis, whether it will work out. So I think maybe 10, 11 months, just in time for
Christmas.
budget 2024.
True, Christmas, New Year coming up.
How many will be named Lawrence is my question.
Or Valentina. Valentino.
Yeah, sure.
Something we will look forward to in the long run, the next 11 to 12 months.
Gosh. Hey, the studio with us this afternoon has been Alvin Liu, Senior Economist at UOB, Harvey Koenig, Partner, Energy and Natural Resources, Telecommunications, Media and Technology, Tax, KPMG in Singapore, and of course, Eugene Tan, Associate Professor of Law, Singapore Management University. Gentlemen, thank you for your time this evening. Take care and have a great week ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Happy
Thank you.
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Money FM Conversations 2023 is presented by
Money FM 89.3. Money FM 89.